American Marketing Academy, which is a huge body in the US. She runs conferences. She is very generous with her time for junior scholars and has been instrumental in the formation of the Transformative Service Research Literature Body, which is basically designing services for good. And that's sort of stormed the marketing. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to introduce Linda, who's going to talk to us about how to succeed in academia as a migrant.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for the warm welcome and for the invitation. I am absolutely thrilled to be here this morning and seeing a full room of scholars. It's really very, very nice. And I feel very welcome. So thank you for being here. And just like Rebecca mentioned, I've had the honor of knowing Rebecca and Byron both when I was still a PhD student. So to be able to come back and deliver this talk is a big honor. So thank you for the invitation. So the topic of my talk today was kind of inspired by our talks with Rebecca over the years here about how to succeed in academia as a migrant. So she mentioned I'm a Texas State, but you can figure from my accent, I don't sound very Texan, right? So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background, tell you how I ended up in Texas. And I can tell you that if someone told me 10 years ago I'll be living in Texas and raising two Texans, technically they are Texans, my kids are born in Texas, I would have said that just crazy talk. So I'll tell you a little bit how I ended up there, but I also wanted to share with you some of the challenges that I've experienced on the way, and then talking with colleagues and PhD students and academics from other areas. I kind of feel like a lot of these issues were kind of recurrent. So we do share a lot of these things together. I wanted to kind of share them with you and maybe provide some ideas of how they helped me how I work to overcome some of these challenges, but also how I changed some of my mindset to see those as a strength, as an opportunity to become, the academic I am today. So let's start with when people ask me, where are you from, or what country you were born? I always tell them, do you want like the short version or the long version? Because there's a lot of complications in my background. I was actually born here. I was born, any guesses from my accent? Ukraine, very good. I was born in Ukraine on the Black Sea in a city called Simferopol. Very beautiful, very, very picturesque. And just so I don't trip. So in a city right on the Black Sea, very beautiful, very picturesque. And from there, so my mom is Ukrainian, so I was born in Ukraine. From there, we moved here. Any guesses?
Lebanon.
You know that. Yeah, that was a trick question. So I grew up in Lebanon, and honestly in a little town. So I didn't grow up in Beirut. I grew up in a town called Deir el-Qamar. It's in the mountains, very picturesque, as you can see, very, very beautiful. If you've ever had Lebanese food, you know, really appreciate really good food, very good weather. And the whole area, and actually my school was up here on this little hill. I went to a French-speaking school, so I've learned French. As some of you might know, Lebanon used to be a French colony, so French was the main language. I didn't learn English until I went to university. So I grew up speaking Ukrainian, Russian at home, then Lebanese, French at school. I learned English by watching Friends and going. For the younger generation, I don't know if you know what Friends is, but back when I was young, that was very, very popular. So this is the town, right? It's very, very picturesque, a lot of palaces. First time mentioned was back in 1257. And from there, I ended up going here. Any guesses? Spain. Little up. So it was kind of south of France, middle of France. And I ended up teaching at the University of Grenoble School of Management. So I taught services marketing there while I was pursuing my PhD. And I did my PhD here. Any guesses?
The Netherlands? The Netherlands or England?
England, yes. I did my PhD at the University of Manchester. So I moved from the capital of Alps, which is Grenoble, to the capital of soccer, which is Manchester. And I lived there for 5 years, right? So These are four different educational systems I've been at before I even got into my first academic job, right? So very different. The education in Lebanon, I was more of a kind of French style than when I went to the Lebanese American University. From there, I moved to Grenoble. Very different. Again, French academia is very different than the UK, and the UK was different style. And now I am here in Texas, right? As I said, 10 years ago, if someone told me I'll end up in Texas, I would have been very, very surprised. I love traveling, as you can tell from my background. That really kind of gave me a lot of, excitement to travel and see the world. And 41 countries, trying to visit all the states, 28 so far. It really helps that my family is multicultural. So my mom is Ukrainian, my dad is Lebanese. Growing up in this multicultural background with families speaking different languages, very different cultures as well, right? Like the Ukrainian, I was born there during the Soviet Union, like the Soviet mindset versus the Lebanese mindset, very different families, very different traditions, very different upbringing and learning different ways of how people do things and think about things. And then moving to Europe, right, being in France for a while, and then in the UK, again, very, very different. And now in Texas, absolutely very, very different. So just to give you a little bit of hopefully legitimacy why I'm giving this talk today as to my background. And when I finished my PhD, when I was offered the job in Texas, I literally thought Texas looks like this. It's a desert with a lot of snakes. I'm not a fan of those. But I was very surprised that when I moved to Austin, this is where I live, Austin looks like this actually. It's a very, very cool city. If you haven't been, definitely put it on your list. It's considered the music capital of the world. There is a street, it's called 6th Street. There's live music any time of the day, 24 hours a day. Really good food, very, very, very green, a lot of hills. And this is my university. Texas State University, we have 3 campuses. This is our main campus. Our campus is in a town called San Marcos, which is, if you think geographically, it's between Austin and San Antonio, kind of between these 2 big cities. So we attract a lot of businesses, a lot of students, because this is like really populated area. And we have 3 campuses. This is the main one. We also have one in Round Rock, which was not North Austin. And then we just opened a campus in Mexico. So we're going international. And one of the things about our campus, again, it's very green, very beautiful. We have massive growth happening in our campus. We just hit 44,000 students on this main campus. That's not counting the other campuses. So the campus is growing. It's a really great time to be there. Now, I told you all this story to kind of get you to the point of why we're here today, right? What are some of the issues that happen along the way? It looks all nice and rosy and very nice progression, but honestly, there has been a lot of things. So my plan was obviously I'm just going to go get a PhD. Everything is very straightforward. In reality, there was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of hurdles to jump, and a lot of things to kind of consider as I was going through that PhD. So let's go back a little bit to the time I did my PhD at the University of Manchester. It didn't start as planned. I wanted to go do my PhD in the US. So I finished my MBA from the Lebanese American University, and I was very keen on going and doing my PhD in the US. What happened is that I missed the deadline. In the US, they have a very strict kind of a timeline of where you can apply. The deadline usually is around January, December. Personal family reasons, I missed that deadline. And I didn't want to go and wait for 1 more year before I can apply again and then go into the degree. So one of the ideas came, why don't you go and do a PhD in the UK? I knew back then that it's going to be fully self-funded. I couldn't afford paying for it. So I was very much aware of the fact that I need a scholarship to go and do my PhD. Well, in the US, it always comes with a scholarship because it comes with a position as a researcher. So that was kind of the plan, but that didn't go to plan. I had to apply to the UK. And in the UK, as I'm not aware how it works here, but in the UK, it's very competitive at that time to get a PhD for a full ride for an international student, right? So I had to think about the expenses of going through the degree, but also of my day-to-day expenses. And at that point, I genuinely knew I cannot afford paying for it. So here is a story I always tell to the PhD students I talk with. I applied to 3 or 4 schools. I believe I got accepted from all of them, including a number of big universities in the UK. But unfortunately, I missed the deadline for the scholarships too. So they called me from the University of Manchester and they say, here's a potential supervisor who is interested in your file, thought you wrote a really strong proposal. They would like to talk to you, but we're not going to consider you for the scholarship. Would you still like to talk to them? I'm sitting back in Lebanon with barely Wi-Fi to connect, because that was, again, not a very stable time. Barely we have power to make sure, am I going to be able to do the call or not? And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm not going to be able to go even if I get the job, even if I get the position. But I was like, let me try. What's the worst that's going to happen? So some of you know, Professor Jamie Burton calls me. And we have a chat over the phone, because again, my internet connection wasn't very good. It was pre-Zoom and pre all these things, so it was over the phone. So we had a great chat, half an hour, talked, asked all sorts of questions, you know, like a regular interview. And then we hang up and I was like, oh, I would have loved working with him. He seemed like a very nice guy, really interested researchers. I was very in line with what he wanted to do. And then 30 minutes later, I get an email saying, he wants you as your PhD student, and we're going to put you for the scholarship. The lesson was that if I said no, I wouldn't have been considered. So that was like lesson number 1. Always take the chance. Even if you don't see where this is going, there's always a way. Apparently later on, I knew he was really impressed with the phone call. He made some calls. He made like, can you please consider her? I had still to apply. But I was so grateful for the opportunity that my file was actually reconsidered. And they included me in the pool, and I ended up applying, and I ended up getting the scholarship. I got a full ride for my PhD, including living expenses, which was very, very competitive. They only give like 2 or 3 across the university at that time. So that's how I ended up in the UK. And I'm forever grateful to my 2 mentors, Professor Jamie Burton, he's the one who interviewed me, but also later on, he introduced me to Professor Thorsten Gruber, who Professor Byron here knows very well as well. And I was so grateful for having them as 2 mentors. Every time I give a talk like this, I always mention them, because big reason where I am today is because I had the great support of 2 really, really great mentors. They taught me everything I know. They opened so many doors for me, and I'm very, very grateful for their guidance and advice. I can talk a lot about how we worked and the dynamics and what are some of the things, but that's not the topic for today. Next time I can do that. But what I've learned mainly from them is this idea of being a balanced academic, right? They really introduced this concept of you really need to excel in today's time and state of academia in all these 3 areas. You got to excel in your research, you got to excel in your teaching, and you got to excel in your service. And if you really want to enjoy what you're doing, you're going to try to find that balanced mindset in all these 3 things, because all these 3 things make up what we are as academics today. And I love this specific graph because it really brings in everything, and me as a service scholar brings this concept of service into your research, this concept of service into your teaching, and the service that we do to our departments, to our colleges, to our profession in general. However, as I mentioned, all these different things have been brought in a lot of different barriers as I was going through, whether it was in landing that PhD or in making sure I land that first job. And some of the things, and the list can go on and on and on, but I wanted to highlight some of the key things that really have been big barriers at that time. One of them is the visa and paperwork issues, right? So as I told you, with the Lebanese and Ukrainian passport, I wasn't on a very high kind of a list, let's say, in securing a visa to the UK or even to the US when I got the job. So for me, getting the acceptance into a program or getting a scholarship into a program was not a guarantee that I'm going to be able to go and, you know, do my studies or start the job. I remember very well when I got the acceptance to the job offer from Texas State. I knew it's going to take me another year until I figure out if I'm going to be able to actually get a work permit to go there. So getting the job was just half of the battle. Meanwhile, a lot of my colleagues who were getting a job in the US, they did their PhD there or they're local. That wasn't a thing for them to think about, right? You got a job, that's it. Start packing your bags. It took a whole year for me not knowing, am I gonna go? Am I gonna get the visa? What kind of new paperwork I have to fill in? That's on one side, like from the work perspective, but also going to conferences, right? As an academic, especially early on, you want to go to as many conferences as possible. I had files and files of documents every time I have to apply for a visa. You have to go, send your passport, bring in. So many of you might relate to that. It's not easy. And it is definitely a big, big toll on having to go through all that for paperwork. Another big barrier and bias is this idea that there's so many linguistic barriers. I remember the first time I gave my seminar at the University of Manchester, because as part of my scholarship, I was teaching. I was terrified standing in a room where I knew that my English is and the class was mainly a British student. It was an undergrad class, where my English is nowhere near good to be able to deliver that lecture. So I'm really feeling very doubting myself. Would I be able to stand in there? Would they be able to understand what I say? I actually even remember when I first moved there, calling my mom and saying, I don't understand what they're saying. Their English is so different than the English that I've learned at school. They don't sound like the English I hear on Friends or on TV, right? So how am I going to live here for 4 or 5 years, not able to understand what people are saying and having to ask 10 times, can you say this again? Excuse me, what was that? Like re-asking many, many times. So that's not easy. And it comes with a lot of, it takes a lot of self-confidence to be able to stand in there and say, I'm going to do it regardless, even though I'm going to make mistakes, even though I might not understand what I'm saying, but I'm going to stand in there and actually deliver my talk. There's also the idea of bias, whether that bias is something you're saying, whether it's an implicit or explicit bias, but you're always going to feel like, well, I don't belong, or I'm not one of the people in the group, or I feel like I'm a fraud, I shouldn't be in this room, right? So there's that mindset that always kind of stays with you. It comes and goes, I think, comes and goes. But there is that also barrier that's always there, that there is that bias that I don't feel like I'm 100% belonging. Access, as researchers, access is everything, right? If I wasn't able to, thankfully, again, I had really good supervisors who were running a center at that time, and I was able to collect my data for my PhD through I did qualitative focus groups and interviews for that first part of the study. And thankfully, they were able to connect me with the respondents. But I still remember talking about access. My first focus group was in Scotland. And I remember sitting there asking questions, people talking, and I'm just like, I'm not sure what they're even saying, because I could not understand what they were saying. Thankfully, it was all recorded and I can go back and stop it and play it again and stop it and play it again. But I realized that after my third and fourth focus group, I started getting a little bit more confident and more comfortable, because I realized, oh, if I understood this when they said that, I could have asked X, Y, and Z. But then again, by re-listening to it and learning one more time, many, many times over, that you can still redo it, that's fine. But the access bit, right? So yes, it was part of my PhD and I got help. But what do you do afterwards? You don't have that network. You don't know any local people. You don't know any businesses around. You don't have that, background connections that you will need to collect data. So it is definitely one of the big biases that and barriers that we experience as scholars. There's also this idea, lack of local knowledge and networks. I remember many times having to ask my supervisor, what does this actually mean when a respondent said that? Because with my cultural background, I could have interpreted it one way. With their cultural background, they were able to explain what actually that respondents meant by saying X, Y, and Z. So it's nothing that I didn't understand. It was just that a cultural background that I didn't understand at that time. So there is that again, that even if you get the access, you might not have the local knowledge needed to interpret what that information or that interviewer is trying to tell you. There's also the family part, right? Leaving family behind. I'm a single child, so for my parents, I'm kind of like the only child that they have. And leaving them and moving far, far away with many, many time zone differences is not easy. And as a student, I had to miss Christmases and I had to miss holidays that I couldn't be there with them because I simply couldn't afford flying back and forth for these trips. So there is that mindset also that you're sacrificing beyond just day-to-day life. You're also sacrificing really important events. There has been family weddings or events or celebrations that I couldn't be there. But also, what if some of them get sick or people need you to be around? It's not easy. So I want to acknowledge that this is a big strain on all of us when we have family and loved ones really far away. And also things don't get easy if you pile these whole things up, right? Being a female, having some sort of a different intersectional background with a specific, lifestyles or a specific ways of doing things. And you combine all these things together, they just make things much more complicated. I wanted to start with these as barriers, but as I'm going through, I'm going to keep referring to some of them and I will kind of giving thoughts and ideas of how some of these have been, navigated, if you want, in this journey. So some of the lessons I learned in this. Number one, and again, I think it goes back to my supervisors. I genuinely believe that in order to navigate a lot of those issues, we gotta have to establish that the research part is one of the key points that you will always have for you. And that's something, again, I learned from my supervisors. They said, you can work for any university, you can work for any department, but your research is yours, right? Your research is your investment. Then you work here, this university is taking part of credit for your research. Tomorrow you move there, the new university is taking credit for your research. So I just wanted to start by saying this is the base, right? Your strong research is your currency, for the lack of better term. Your name, your reputation, your research is your currency. So this is one of the key things that I've learned, and I try to make sure that what I do and what I research is something that motivates me on day-to-day basics. I like to call it the sweet spot of my research, and I highly encourage, especially those junior members present here today, is make sure that what you're researching is your sweet spot, something you really enjoy doing. And the way I see it, your sweet spot in your research is something you're passionate about, something you really care about answering, something you really want to learn more about. Combine that with what you're good at, right? Whether it's a method, whether it's an approach, whether it's a specific a part of the project that you're good at, right? I work with different people. Some people are really good at the method. Some people are work at the conceptualization. Some people are good at the writing, bringing the whole team together. So what is it that your strength is about? Bring that in. And hopefully what you care about and what you're motivated about is important, both theoretically and practically. And by the way, if you want to learn more about that, I'll be giving that talk on Monday. We'll talk about your research sweet spot more. So I'll go into that in more details. But if you can find your sweet spot, then publishing and getting that research out, it's not going to make it easier, but at least hopefully it makes it more worthwhile. Makes it more enjoyable if you find the right spot where you think you can thrive, put in your strength, get your motivation in, you're doing something you care about, and hopefully it's something important. Then find the right space, right? Again, I have to think about that. I kind of stumbled into this by accident, but now that I think about it, most of the research that I found, I could summarize that I do, and that published more than 35 articles so far. All of them could be put into this bucket. All of them in one way or another, they're trying to answer one question that motivates me. How can we design, implement, and manage services in ways that are not harmful, but rather uplifting to all involved stakeholders? So this is kind of, think about it as my positioning statement, if we want to talk about marketing, right? What's my positioning statement? I'm trying to answer this question. And it helps because then your research is all coming under one umbrella. It's not a piece here, a piece there, a piece there, right? So this is what helps you build your identity as a researcher when you have a specific positioning statement. And I think Rebecca's going to talk more about that later today, right? This afternoon. So in my mind, my positioning statement or my research map looks like this. I do frontline work, and that comes under services, service employees. Recently, I've been doing a little bit more in the sales area. TSR, which has been at the core of what I do. More vulnerability research at the intersection of these. Some service technology as well. And I see myself navigating around here, right? So most of my work could be put within these 4 buckets if you want, but I always try to combine them in ways that they reflect who I am. Now, I wrote be strategic there because, again, you start your PhD, you're working on 1 or 2 or 3 publication, depends on what the university criteria are. But after that, you gotta be strategic, right? You gotta be more strategic as to what we take. And I see that a lot of times where junior faculty are like, they're trying to do 100 things at the same time. And that doesn't help with building that positioning or branding that we're talking about. So being strategic as to what project to take on, what journals to target, which co-authors to approach. All of these, they don't just happen. They really require more of a strategic approach as we move forward. And as I mentioned, it's publish or perish, right? So knowing the metrics, knowing the journal metrics, knowing your own metrics, how are you performing? How are your papers performing? What journals are you sending in? Which lists are you targeting? These are all part of that conversation of, am I meeting those standards that I want to meet or not? So that's on the research side of things, right? Hopefully we find something we're passionate about. We're aiming to a high level. We're establishing that brand because that's the brand that's going to help us move forward. The other important part, which really has helped me a lot, is this idea of finding and choosing your tribe. And my specific tribe, again, thanks to my supervisors who kind of introduced me to this tribe, is ServSig. Right? I started going to ServSig conference since I was a PhD student. I remember going and not knowing anybody. Today, I'm so glad to say that I go to the ServSig conferences. I know 90% of the people. And it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference because this is the community you are having and building your conversation within. Right? It's so much harder contributing when you don't have at least a little bit of boundaries around which contribution you're trying to make, which conversations you're trying to be part of. So it really helps finding this community. And again, I'm not saying everyone should be following this community. Each one of you will have to find their own community and try to be part of that community because this is the conversations that you're building. These are the people you're citing. These are the people who are reading your work. Right? These are the people who are reviewing your work, right? So knowing them, that makes a difference, right? These are the editors where you're going to be sending those papers. These are, the opportunities, the co-authors that might approach you and say, hey, I saw your talk on X, Y, and Z. I'm doing this. Would you like to co-author? Right? So finding that group or tribe or community or whatever you want to call it is extremely important. And I know while the field is growing, whatever it's marketing, management, they're huge. There are so many subcategories, and there is a reason for that. It's like a niche, finding your group where you can actually make a contribution. And a research philosophy. I've always used the fact that I've come from a multinational background, I believe, to kind of live that research philosophy. So I use that mindset of, I do come from different countries. I've gone through different institutions with different educational systems. I'm going to try to use that mindset as I look at myself as a global researcher, right? So I've co-authored with 50 plus co-authors from all over the world. Right? I've co-authored with Rebecca, I've co-authored with a lot of people in Europe, but also beyond that, collecting data. So I'm no more the victim of, I don't know anybody around here. Now, I know someone in Belgium who has access to data there. They can take care of the data collection there. I don't need to be there. I'm bringing in the other side of the conversation. I'm helping with the theorizing. I'm helping with the conceptualization. I don't have the barrier of, I don't know anybody, I cannot collect my data anymore. Right? So you're working with other people who have access to data, but maybe they don't have the strength you can bring into the project. Whenever I get invited, I always try my best to make it happen. I do love going to different universities and learning about the different systems. I just spent my sabbatical in Belgium, and I was really amazed as to, like, you think of Europe as one country, but how different the different educational systems in Belgium versus the Netherlands versus Germany versus Italy versus the UK. Absolutely different ways of doing things, right? And just learning about that makes me think, well, I'm not the odd one anymore, because if people within half an hour away from each other have such different educational system, that's totally normal that I don't feel I fit in this university or in that setting, right? So this kind of helps you think about it as it's an opportunity to practice your strength, your access, your your network, and learn about other educational systems to use that as an advantage. And Rebecca mentioned a little bit, I definitely also do believe that all these research related activities, right? Being a editor-in-chief, or before that, I was for a very long time, I was an associate editor for Journal of Services Marketing and the Service Industries Journal. I have to give that make an editor, there's so much you can do. But you don't become an editor by suddenly overnight, right? You start building that momentum. You start reviewing for conferences. I remember very well as a PhD student, my Thorsten, my supervisor, he would send me papers that he used to receive to review, because I asked him, I want to learn how to review. That's not part of your PhD training unless you attend a course on how to review, right? So he would be like, here's the paper I received. Why don't you review it anonymously? And I'm going to review it. And then we're going to meet and discuss the feedback of how we reviewed the paper. And I've learned so much from that experience. So after that, I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm not qualified to review fully for journals, but I can review possibly for conferences. So I started emailing conference organizer, can you please add me to the reviewer pool? And believe me, there's always the need for reviewers. So you can start with reviewing for conferences, and then once you publish your first paper, you start being in that journal review list, and hopefully you do a good job and take it forward. But I genuinely think there is a big need for us to start learning how to review early on as possible, because it is part of, that's what's going to get you to become a guest editor. That's what's going to get you to become an associate editor. That's what's going to get you to become an editor eventually. And all sorts of service. I probably would not recommend doing so much service to anybody. I probably overdid it over the years, but honestly, it has always been where I found the passion and the motivation. I always looked at service as an opportunity to network and learn and meet new people and learn different side of this academic work. Academia is not just about writing papers or teaching classes. There is a lot more to that. And to be able to learn all these things, you gotta be involved in many, many opportunities, whether it's organizing conferences, organizing. Let me tell you another story. I remember very well when I was a PhD student, again, there's barely any budget left for me to wanting to go to all these conferences. And basically I've been told, I don't have money to send you anywhere. I remember emailing the conference co-chairs and asking them, I really want to come to your conference. I don't have any funding. I'm willing to volunteer and do whatever you want me to do so I can come to the conference. Guess what? As someone who's organized conferences, there's always a need for volunteers. They were so happy that I emailed them and volunteered. They're like, yes, I said, I can do your social media. I can come up with flyers. It was basic stuff, nothing complicated. And they gave me a free registration. And all I needed to do is pay my flight. And now one more advice, I've learned it from one of my mentors. Always save money for conferences. Whether it's a $10 a month, $100 a month, whatever you can afford, have a budget for your conferences, especially as a junior scholar, because the opportunities you have when you go to these events, and I'll talk a little bit more about what to do when you go to conferences. But just to get the foot in the door, it's so, so important. So always have a budget for, how you budget for your clothes, food, apartment, what have you. Always budget a little bit for your conferences. And if you can't, offer your time to volunteer, right? I remember helping out with that conference. It was such a great experience hopefully I did a good job. They were like, we waived the registration. That was like $1,000. That was a lot. But that conferences, I met the person who eventually ended up hiring me at Texas State. If I didn't go, I wouldn't have met them. There's so many stories in my life that have been so, things happened in one way or another. But if I didn't put in the effort without thinking this is where it's going to go, it wouldn't have happened. And I genuinely believe in that mindset that we do things sometimes without knowing exactly where this is going. But if you do it with the proper mindset and the proper, motivation, something good is going to end up happening. Another thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is this idea of understanding the academic landscape. Education couldn't have been more different in the UK than it is in Lebanon, than it is in the US. Totally different systems. Absolutely totally different systems. I remember being hired at the University of Manchester before my defense. Something will never happen in the US. You've got to finish your PhD to be hired as an assistant professor. I was hired as an assistant professor in the UK before I did my defense. Now, tenure criteria could not be more different. In the US, I was told you have 5 years, you got to publish this many papers, this is the ranking, this is the journal list, you got to hit those goals. It was super clear. It was as clear as it can be. And the UK was very approximate. You got to be great at teaching. Here's 100 courses for you to teach. Here's you got to be great at funding, but I don't know if you know anybody who can help you with funding applications. And you got to be great at this, and you got to be good at that, and you got to sit on all these committees. In the US, your time is protected in the first 5 years. There is actually a term of protecting the tenure clock, which is you're not put on committees because your time should be dedicated for research, because you have this list that you agreed on when you joined. So knowing what is required in the university where you're going, in the system where you're going, is absolutely essential. And I put some examples here. What is the tenure like in the place where you're going? What are the criteria for tenure? I believe it's called promotion. What is it called here? What do you call it? Do you call it tenure?
No, promotion.
Promotion, right? So what are the criteria for promotion? What are the teaching expectations? Basically, in the UK, I was told you're going to be a good teacher. In the US, I was told as long as your averages are not less than 4, you're good. 4/5. Right? So I was told, don't kill yourself for teaching, because what matters for your tenure is your research. I always hit the above 4, obviously, but I was basically told that even if your research teaching is not ideal, your still matters is your research. Publication pressure. I was told I need to publish 2 papers a year in the US. I haven't been told that in the UK, for example. And funding hierarchies. How do you go about funding? But most importantly, I think it's really important to understand the hidden stuff that are not written on a piece of paper. How to network. And another example. The US, networking is like you're going on a mission to network. People actually would look like, which university are you? To decide whether you're worthy to be talked to or not. It's the reality, right? People are very, very aggressive in the way they network, and that's how it is. And best part of it is that PhD students are taught to network aggressively at conferences. You go with a list of people you need to talk to. Now, on the other hand, there's other systems where that's not even part of the conversation. I tend to be like somewhere in the middle. I think there needs to be a preparation before going to a conference. So these are the people I'm going to talk to. These are the topics I'm going to talk to them about. And this is how I'm going to follow up after I go home to keep the conversation going. A lot of people tend to go to conferences maybe not as aggressively, but also not taking full advantage of the opportunity. And I think there is a missed opportunity there to make sure you're building that conversation and meeting the key people. But when you approach people, you need to know what they research. What was their last paper? Where was it published? What was the impact? What is it that you want to get out of that conversation? So these are things we got to think about before we go to conferences. And again, I'm one of those people who believe that the whole mindset of a conference is far beyond just presenting your presentation. I think that's an old kind of over time, most likely we're going to just get rid of that. And we're seeing more new ways of doing conferences, like the dialogical conferences where people come together to come up with an idea and actually work with each other. But if we look at the traditional conferences, I think a lot of us go there for the networking part, because I can go and read Rebecca's paper in the journal next month. I don't need to listen to her talk about it. I can put it in ChatGPT, it'll give me the summary, right? So the point is for me to actually go there and talk to her, right? Learn something, figure out, oh, what's the latest you're working on? I'm very interested in this area. I have the school access to this project. Or is there anything I could be helpful with? I have this expertise or that expertise, or I bring in this methodology, or I know this theory or whatever. Obviously, this needs to be substantiated, but I'm giving examples of how that conversation could possibly go. And it really breaks my heart when I see a lot of PhD students or early career scholars going to conferences and just not using those opportunities to their best advantage. Because guess what? All these senior scholars, they love talking to PhD students. They do. And I think there is this barrier between, oh, what am I going to say? Or I'm not prepared, or I don't know what to say, or I'm going to sound not very, and I think overcoming that is so important. So there's a lot to be learned there. How is service perceived differently? Like, as I mentioned, in the US, I was told, say no to any possible service opportunity. My chair actually tells me, if someone comes and tells you to do X, Y, and Z, you come and ask me before you accept. To protect my time, because my time, I'm on a clock. I have a 5-year clock. I need to publish 15 papers by the end of those 5 years. If I don't do it, I'm out. Right? So I'm told to say no to service. So if I didn't know that, or if someone didn't explain that to me, or I didn't look at what is everyone else doing, I wouldn't know that. How to negotiate? What could you negotiate? And what couldn't you negotiate? And when to say no, I think that's another very important thing, right? Like, I was very fortunate to have a chair that says, I'll say no for you. Just blame it on me. What I tell my current PhD students and staff. Just blame it on me, right? It's my fault, not yours. So you don't want to create a negative environment. But figure out these things so that you can learn how to negotiate, navigate that. But most importantly, learn what is success in your own departments. Success might look totally different in different departments. Some departments really focus on that teaching. You got to be an excellent teacher. You got to hit a couple of publications, but you need to be collegiate. Collegiality is an important part of whether they promote people or not. It might not be written on paper, but people want to work with someone they like, right? So collegiality might not be written in the laws, but people might be like, well, this person is difficult to work with. We don't want to promote them. You gotta learn these things. They're not written anywhere. And the only way to learn these things is to come to morning coffees, hang out with your colleagues, spend time together, go for lunches, especially as a junior scholar. We're all busy and we're all very have 100 things on our mind, but I'm pretty sure if you go to a senior colleague and you say, I really want to pick your brain on this, or I'm struggling with that, or I really don't know how to fit in with this specific topic, I have a high positive feeling that most of them will be like, yeah, let's go for a coffee. Or yeah, let's just chat about it. If you're not going to ask, they're not going to come and ask you to do that. So you got to be proactive. Another important part is that I genuinely never looked at my cultural diversity as a problem. I always looked at it as a strength. Rebecca and I are very keen on the strength-based approach. We actually have a special issue in the Journal of Business Research right now on the strength-based approach, where we're basically saying that we need to look at the strength of everything rather than looking at the negative side of things. That's kind of in a very basic way. And I kind of translate that here. I never looked at my cultural background or the fact that I have an accent or the fact that I'm coming from Lebanon or what have you as a negative thing. So I always looked at it, changed my mindset to look at it as a positive thing, right? It really helped me bring in so many new examples in my teaching that my students might not have heard of, but also that my colleagues were not building on because they didn't know them either, right? Same as in my research, right? The access or the ideas, like I do a lot of work on the refugees, and I'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow, about service systems for refugees. I had refugees in my family. When the Ukrainian war started, my aunt was a refugee. My cousin and his wife are refugees right now. I have firsthand experience of what they're going through. Researching that with someone you might not have never met a refugee in your life. It's completely different than when you call your aunt and you talk to her. Like day-to-day life, how are they living? How are they setting up? What are the challenges? It gives you a completely different perspective. So I don't sit here thinking, well, you know, it's a negative side that I come from Ukraine, or it's a downside, or it has been holding me back. On the opposite, I really think it really had propelled me to the future, bringing in these different mindset and ideas. It helps you bring in different epistemologies, different contexts to your work. The paper we published on refugee was the first paper ever that addressed the refugee crisis in services. No one has ever taught about services for refugees before that first paper got published. And I really think if I didn't have that experience from my family, maybe that whole field wouldn't have moved, got established and people got interested in emergency services and services for people who, are going through some of these struggles. I tend to frame accent and difference. I always start my classes in my undergrad and graduate classes, like, guess where I'm from for my accent. I lead with that. I don't try to hide it. And the few slides I started with this talk with, I start the same slides with every class I teach. I'm proud of that, right? It's the reason where I am today. And I always thank my background for what I have today, because again, I'm proud of it. I don't think it has been negative for me. It has been really propelling to where I am today. So develop a signature area where your cultural lens can become an advantage. If you have a cultural lens that can become an advantage, that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. Build your network. I talked a little bit about that and gave you the example of applying for all sorts of funding. So I told you earlier that originally I wanted to do my PhD in the US. So when I started my PhD, I was remembering very well talking to Jamie and Thorsten and telling them, I want to go to the US after I finish my PhD. So from day one, I was targeting AMA, AMS, the US-based conferences, because in the back of my mind, I want to finish my PhD and I want to move to the US educational system. I personally love it. I think there's a lot of bad things happening in the US. Let's put that aside. But on the good side, I really like academia in the US, and I like what it gives the professors in the way we teach and do research. So I really wanted that kind of mind, that I could see that path in front of me. So I really targeted that mindset. So if you have a university you're really keen on joining once you finish, or if there is a specific country you're really keen on going after you finish, you got to start planning for that goal early on. So I went to all the US-based conferences. I really wanted to go and apply to all types of US-based funding. I joined DocSig, which is the doctoral body for the PhD students in the US. And that's kind of how I started getting involved with AMA early on as a PhD student. and going to as many events as possible that were hopefully helping me get there. Very important. I want to also say it wasn't all me and all the stuff that I did. I want to give big credit to people who have helped me. This was my first AMA conference. I was a PhD student. This is the conference. It was a winter AMA in Vegas. I got to meet Mark Rosenbaum. That was Thorsten, my PhD supervisor. Lori Anderson, Martin and Maura, Martin Mende and Maura Scott, she's an editor in Journal of Marketing. This is Mary Jo Bittner, one of the legends of the field. So going to this conference and meeting these people for the first time, it was absolutely mind-boggling because for me, I'm like sitting there reading their work, and then you get to meet them and you're in a special session with them. Now I'm so happy to say I co-author with all of them, except Mary Jo, but she retired before I even finished my PhDs. But we published with Mark, published with Lori, and I currently have a project with Martin and Maura. And it's just, back then, I never thought that I would get a chance to even, because for me, they were like, you know, the legends. I'm going to be able to publish with them. But also beyond that, I really want to give a big importance to the importance of finding mentors, senior mentors who can really, really help you. For me, these two people it's Professor Ray Fisk and Professor Jacob Nampuli. They really helped me. Jay specifically, I was still a PhD student. He was the prior editor of the Journal of Service Management, by the way. And I remember meeting him the first time at a conference. Again, Thorsten told me, you go to this conference, you make sure you talk to him. And I remember it's my first conference. I'm standing there getting my coffee. I'm looking around. I don't know anybody. And he comes to me and he says, "Hi, I'm Jay." And I'm like, I know that right in my mind. And then we started the conversation. And then I remember asking him, I was like, you know, everyone talks about go to a conference and network as a PhD student. I'm like, I don't know anybody. How am I supposed to network here? And he gave me a tip. I always share that with everyone. Just go and offer your help. All these big professors are busy. They need someone to help them. So I remember going back home and emailing him and saying, well, you mentioned that we can help. How can I help? He's like, I need someone to help me with the social media of the journal. Right? So I started a LinkedIn page and all that stuff. Eventually, we worked together for 10 years, all the way until he stepped down from the journal editor. And it's been a mind-blowing collaboration because I met so many wonderful people in that specific role, because he gave me a title, social media coordinator. As a PhD student, I thought I'm the queen of the world, right? Because I'm like, oh, I get to email Byron and get an interview with him, or I'm going to email Rebecca and get to talk to her about her research. I thought that was so cool, and it was super cool because it opened so many doors and opportunities. Later on, that's the conference that I went to that Thorsten couldn't go to, and I ended up going to the TCR conference, and that's where I met Ray. And I was just, again, my curiosity. I was like, so what's the difference between a system in the UK and in the US? And we started talking, and he's like, well, by the way, we're hiring at Texas State. Why don't you apply? I'm like, I have a job in the UK. Remember, I told you I already had a job, so I was finishing my last year. I wasn't even looking for a job at that point. And I'm like, I thought he was just being polite. So I was like, thank you, appreciate that. Went back, trying to finish my PhD while working a full-time job. So I was a full-time lecturer while trying to finish my PhD. 2 weeks later, he emails me, hi, Linda, the deadline is whatever. We still haven't received your application. Like, is this for real? Professor Ray Fisk emailing me to apply? Like, okay, I'm going to find time to apply. I genuinely was not planning on going to the US at that time. I applied, and the rest is history. Right? These are the opportunities you get from conferences and meeting people, influential people who can actually make a difference. But again, I didn't approach them saying, give me a job or introduce me to X or give me something. The mindset is, what can you offer? And then the opportunity is going to come. This is I'm so happy I took a screenshot of this. This is the old web page. Look at me. I'm so proud of myself. Social media coordinator. It was that's Nazar before I got married. right? And now I'm the co-editor-in-chief. Same thing happened with SurfSig. So SurfSig is the community where I am. I remember very well the co-chair, Werner, approaching me at one of the conferences saying, you did such a good job for the journal. I desperately need someone to help me with the SurfSig social media. Would you be willing to help? Electronic media officer. Later on, I became the co-chair for 4 years of SurfSig. I passed it on now. But again, you got to start somewhere, right? You don't become the main person leading this unless you start from the ground up. And a lot of these have been really instrumental in meeting all these wonderful people and being part of this community. So volunteering your time, not always thinking of a one-on-one benefit. I'm going to do this to get that out of it. It doesn't work this way. It's human relationships. They don't work this way. Work with different co-authors, again, especially for the junior people. I mean, actually, when I joined Texas State, I was told you need to publish with different people. You can't just publish with your supervisors. Papers you publish with your PhD supervisors, they don't count for your tenure. I had to find my way around. And actually, even though I loved working with both Thorsten and Jamie, we never published again after I finished my PhD. It's just that everyone took off with their own areas and we started doing different things. Work on different topics. In other words, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? That's another area. I can talk about it forever, but for the interest of time, I'm going to move on. Different methods. Again, as a PhD student, you want to bring in those different methods. I'm actually co-chairing the Best Dissertation Award for AMA this year. And the wide variety of methods that are out there is mind-blowing. This is your time to invest in that if you are a junior scholar. And collaboration, right? So you're bringing in all that international part of what you do to enrich your work and enrich your network. Focusing on that brand proposition or your brand positioning that I mentioned earlier. I'm not going to spend much time in here because I know Rebecca's talking about that later today, but she's going to be talking about this global brand, right? What do you want to be known for, in other words? How do you want people to think about you? I'd like to think that people think of TSR, they think of me, right? Because that's where I wanted to kind of build the area of expertise that I'm in. That doesn't mean you're not going to do other things, but this is your main area of work, at least for the foreseeable future. Seek research grants and fellowships. This could be a really great opportunity to, again, put your name on the out there, but also in a lot of these instances, they have very specific criteria, and there is a lot of opportunities for people wanting to do research in different areas that are maybe understudied, different contexts that are not very well known. So there's a lot of opportunity to invest that cultural background in applying for fundings that maybe no one else is applying for, right? Engage in exchanges, right? So I'm very grateful to be here today. Because again, get to meet so many new people, get to meet so many new backgrounds. I've learned so much already about how this school is run, which is completely different than where I come from. And we talked a little bit about differences in departments and positions and all of that. I think this is great. These are things, maybe next time I meet someone from Australia, I'll be like, well, this is what I learned, how they do it there. And then we're going to start a conversation. Right? So all these different pieces of information help. But another thing I wanted to say is that this idea of definitely doing research with integrity, right? Making sure that you are adhering to the ethical standards, because no matter where you are, this is gold standard, right? Whether it's in the UK, whether it's in the US, whether it's in Europe and Australia, anywhere, ethical standards and research and professional interaction. And even though it might seem like this is such a huge world out there, in reality, academia is a very small world, and everyone knows everyone. The one thing that goes wrong somewhere, suddenly everyone knows about it. So it does feel like it's a huge group, it's a lot of people, but in reality, when it comes to something like that, everyone gets to know it. Everyone gets to know, and it only takes one mistake or one issue. Close that door forever. Promote your brand. It is much easier today than it used to be. I don't know how people used to network when you didn't have LinkedIn and you didn't have 100 other platforms that will help you connect and build connections and stay on top of it. But I think these are essential nowadays. These are essential as whatever you promise yourself a day, you're going to write 1,000 words or whatever your specific goal for the day is. I think being engaged with these until you establish your brand and you become more and more known, these are absolutely essential. Whether it's a networking platform or research platform, sharing your finding, social blogs, etc. Absolutely essential to keep the conversation going. And again, I would build on these specific areas of your background to expand your network. So I do connect with people from different backgrounds and ideas and cultures based on what I'm researching. So we had this big project we conducted in Colombia. I ended up meeting a lot of the decision makers in that organization that we work with. And I'm still in touch with them. I still follow what they do, how they work, what are some of the issues that we could possibly exchange. So it's one way to keep you connected to the groups out there. We talked a little bit about reviewing. Those of you who are doing research and service, one of the things we're doing at the Journal of Service Management, we're offering a reviewing path for early scholars. So if you are a junior scholar who's interested in engaging more in reviewing, please do reach out because we do have a path. So what we do, we don't send the review of the PhD student to the authors, but by reviewing, you will get to see the reviews of the other expert reviewers. And that's our way to make sure the next generation is also learning how to review. We actually will be organizing a reviewer workshop at the next ServSig conference. So we're very keen as a journal to make sure that we are raising the standards of reviews and doing reviewing workshop. Another great way to build your brand and build your credibility in an area where you might feel like, oh, is organized conference. We were just talking about it with Rebecca. I probably organized more than I should have ever organized, starting with like Frontiers conferences all the way to the Winter AMA last year. We had 1,200 people from all around the world. That was massive conference. It's like the biggest AMA ever. A lot of great lessons. I've learned and met a lot of great people. I don't want to do it again anytime soon. But as a junior scholar, I highly, highly encourage to get engaged in organizing events like that. It could be in your countries. It could be in a specific area. It could be in a specific within your tribe. Remember we talked about earlier. It could be anywhere from a PhD doctoral event like this. How can I help? You want me to print something for you? Do you want me to be the social media guru for the event? Do you want me to take pictures? Pretty sure she will say yes. Right? So anything like that is already a great exposure because then you get to build a relationship, right? Seek impact, and again, it depends on the various areas of research, but making sure that we're translating our academic research to non-academics. And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. And again, this is another topic I could talk about forever. But we were very fortunate that some of the work that we've done, we were able to publish the World Economic Forum, which then was read by way more people than just our academic friends and colleagues. We've applied for awards and that created a lot more buzz around what you do. So I think there is opportunities out there if properly marketed and properly positioned. All that background is really bringing a lot of new ideas and suggestions and wealth of knowledge that maybe if we didn't pursue it this way wouldn't have happened. So to sum up, build credibility through consistent high quality output. I still believe the gold standard is high quality research because it is the gold standard to establish everything else around. It's only after I published my first JSR that I was considered, which is one of our top journals, that you're like good elite. You're good enough now to be part of this conversation. Is what it is. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you in your different areas, you have that one or two journals that are like, unless you publish there, you're still trying, right? Document everything. It's so important. Sometimes we take things for granted. I document everything. Maybe I don't have time to go and update my resume every day, but I have a list of like, add this talk, add this mentorship, add this thing. And then once, whatever, every 3-4 months, I just have this whole list. I go and put it in there. As academics, The bigger your resume, the better. We don't need to stick to 1 or 2 pages like in the business world, right? So you get that luxury. So document everything. When I was teaching as a PhD student, they didn't collect a class evaluation for seminar teaching. They only did that for the professors. I designed my own because I wanted to have my own feedback that I can say, here's some qualitative comments from some of the students that I taught. It wasn't part of what the university did at that time. Service, whatever you do, document that. Cultivate allies and mentors, as I mentioned. These have been the people that have helped me along the way. They gave me advice. They wrote recommendations. I think both Ray and Jay have written more than 50 or 60 recommendation letters for me over the years for various things. You need those people because they are the one who are going to open doors for you, whether directly or indirectly. So find those mentors in your own areas, whoever they are, that are well-known, well-established, well-respected, that will be your allies. They will be your mentors. Set healthy boundaries. I really think that we go through a lot as migrants, whether it's the emotional strain, whether it's the feeling of not fitting in, whether it's all the paperwork and the visas that no one else had to worry about, but that was an extra workload for us to navigate and stress to navigate. So setting healthy boundaries and self-care, building community, whether it's within your departments or also outside your departments, right? So you find your community, you find maybe it's not like we joke with our group of friends in Austin, they're our chosen family. We don't have our own families around, but we do have a group of people we call our chosen family. They're the friends we celebrate birthdays and Christmases and Thanksgiving, because our actual families are miles and miles and miles away. But we're fortunate to have a chosen family, and it's so important. And be proactive and work hard. I don't think anyone goes to academia thinking I'm going to have a work-life balance. You're thinking that? Very sorry to disappoint. That's probably not the right career path. But the way I look at it, a lot of my co-authors are very good friends of mine. So for me, the lines are not this is work and this is life, right? There's a lot, especially if you are an international scholar, a lot of other people you're going to relate to are going through the same things you're going through. So finding that and kind of, building on that and creating that mindset is so important. And working hard. I genuinely think as a migrant, you gotta work double if you are not a migrant because of all these reasons. So realizing that is very, very important. Most importantly, pay it forward. When you make it, because I'm sure a lot of you will make it, build inclusive research teams. Be more cognizant of the importance of supporting those who might be going through what you went through 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Advocate for diversity in hiring and curriculum and in the review processes, right? How can we teach this course with a more cultural understanding? Or how can we teach that specific area or be more diverse in the way we build our committees, right? So that it is an understanding of that. Mentor and empower others. I mean, I took it as a mission because really I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the mentors who helped me. So I'm really keen on making sure I help serve it forward in the way I talk with junior PhD students. And I came across this specific quote. I thought it's pretty fitting. Success in academia is not about fitting in. You don't want to be fitting in, right? That's not the point. Point is you want to be standing out with your integrity, purpose, and perseverance. So the idea of I want to try to fit in, that's not what we want. Hopefully we want to be standing out with the multicultural background and all these positive, things that come with that. Have some resources here. They might be a little bit more biased towards marketing and service. So look them up. There are opportunities out there. There are people also working within these areas that might be coming from different backgrounds as well. And this is my LinkedIn if you want to follow me, and this is my email. So thank you so much.